The chance to shape your future is here. Learn and connect with exciting new opportunities. Are you ready for the next step?
All right, good morning everybody. Welcome everybody to this 1 hour session which has been titled The Channel to Net Zero. And this features our work on developing approaches to decarbonise the maritime sector. In particular, we will be featuring our work around how solutions need to develop to provide the landward infrastructure to meet this growing demand for decarbonised energy to power activity. We're fortunate enough today to be joined by Craig Salter of ABP Limited to give us a Welsh-specific perspective using insights from their facilities across South Wales. I'm Mark Ray, and I work in the Clean Energy and Infrastructure team at KTN, and I will chair this session. I'm joined by colleagues from the transport team, Matthew Moss, who's our expert in maritime, and Simon Buckley, who's our expert, and I think we've now moved on from low through to ultra low to now zero emission vehicles. Next slide, please. So we are the UK's Innovation Network Partner, KTN, and we work across 22 specialist sectors, and we perform the connect function. Next slide. Our primary activities, therefore, are to connect, to source funding, to help inform and influence, and to support and help navigate the impossible jungle that is the innovation ecosystem. Next slide. When it comes to the maritime sector, one of the greatest challenges we face is how to decarbonise our industries and society at large. And for decades, we've built up our systems dependent on fossil fuels to energise them. In the maritime environment, it is a complex place with many systems converging in singular geographic locations. They're filled with substantive assets burning large quantities of predominantly diesel fuel to mobilise them. And much of this equipment, vehicles and vessels, is transitory and operates on a global platform. So decarbonising the marine environment is a Herculean task, and will require international cooperation with informed and determined local action. This is partly why the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets at an international scale are for 50% reduction by 2050. But here in the UK, we remain committed to showing global leadership and have ourselves a 100% reduction target. Ports and harbours are a particular challenge with complex ownership patterns for not only the place, but also the equipment and assets within it. These assets have long lifespans covering several decades and are significant capital investments. They have specific functions to perform and often used for extensive run periods, with some running 24 hours per day. Current commercially available low zero emission equipment solutions do not readily lend themselves to the duty required. We do not currently have the energy network to support them. Therefore, we need to quickly reach consensus about how we will transform and transition to net zero carbon in our ports and harbours. Next slide, please. So this challenge provided us with the inspiration for the KTN to establish an innovation network to address the decarbonising of ports and harbours. And we officially launched this in October 2020. This is one of a handful of innovation networks launched at this time. And those with net carbon as the major challenge, we have been looking at next generation batteries and their application and the hydrogen economy. Next slide, please. So for decarbonising ports, our aim is to catalyse pockets of cross-sector activity and establish a community with a common goal to enable the coordination of effort in addressing the challenge of reducing emissions arising from road, rail, buildings and machinery associated with the port landside activity, and provide the infrastructure to service a growing demand for non-fossil fuel derived energy for connecting activity, such as vessels and rail. Next slide, please. So our activity is guided by an advisory group, which has grown slightly since this slide was put together. Our advisory group is made up of challenge owners. These are the organisations who own and in some case operate the ports, and includes the likes of the Royal Navy and Associated British Ports, who we'll hear from later. Also included solution providers, those who operate the ports or provide solutions to the challenge owners through their supply chains. And also then the final category, the influencers, those who create or lobby on policy, taxation, regulation, and insurance. Our group is fortunate enough to be chaired by Dr. Jo North, who's the Director of Technology and Transformation, Port of Tyne, and she's deputised by Commodore Jeremy Bailey of the Royal Navy, based out of HMNB Portsmouth. They're a highly engaged and motivated group, and it is a pleasure to work with them. Next slide, please. So since our launch last year, we've been growing our community and promoting our planned activity. We currently have over 250 individuals representing around 200 organisations who've expressed interest in engaging with us and contributing to the work we'll be doing this year. And if you want to find out more about us, our planned work and how you can connect, then please visit our webpage. There you can watch the video of the launch event with our socially distanced panel discussing why this is important and what we're going to do about it. You can also read about our planned activity, and as the event's open to registration, you can sign up to be able to contribute to our workshops, etc. In a little while, you're going to hear from my colleagues about their work streams and how you can contribute to them. Slide, please. First, just as a quick overview of what we're going to be doing this year. Our work plan for 2021 breaks down to 3 main areas of activity. Working groups, and these are used to inform our workshops and the subsequent reports, maps and outputs that we'll be producing. Our workshops will be where we look to validate a landscape map of the challenges we face and who has the capabilities to solve them. We're developing a roadmap of solutions and how we're going to develop those solutions over the next 10 years, and build an investment plan to present to the private and public sector on the levels of funding and finance that the port sector will need to deliver a net zero carbon solution. We'll also be running a series of innovation exchange, and our innovation exchange platform will be used to address here and now challenges. We'll be talking about this later. I'll be talking about this later on in this session. So hopefully this sets the scene a bit on why we're interested in this subject and an outline of what we're going to do. So up next, I'm delighted that Craig Salter from ABP Limited can join us. Craig is the electrical asset manager for ABP in Wales, and although his geography has recently been extended to the UK wide. So welcome, Craig, and it'd be great to hear from the front line on the challenges you face. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Just about good morning all. As I say, my name is Craig Salter, and I'm the Regional for Wales and Short Sea Ports Asset Manager Electrical. So my natural tendencies are to renewable and electrical side, but I will also be talking about the plant side and fuel side as well today. Bit of a strange to be presenting like this, but let's give it a go. Next slide, please. Just a quick couple of slides just to set the scene. ABP has 21 ports around the country. My area covers 17 of them, ranging from Scotland down to the southwest, East Anglia, northwest, and of course the 5 ports in Wales, which until my role changed, that was my remit. I'll be going through the first slides a little bit quickly, and I'll try to keep my speed down a little bit. Mainly the fact it's just setting the scene, the first couple. And then I will get onto the strategies and the issues that we've encountered in decarbonisation. Next slide, please. ABP, this is a group picture for ABP from have we spent money from 2011. It's about 50 million, and we started off looking at the easy stuff like lighting and so forth. My marine colleagues have been looking at pilot vessel design to reduce the fuel there. And around the regions, we've been looking at things like material handling cranes and so forth, which are a big issue, and fork trucks. And the big one for South Wales, I suppose, is we've really concentrated on, and we were the first really to concentrate on renewable generation. And we've spent quite a bit on that type of technology. Next slide, please. From the beginning, from 2011, this is what we're doing in 2019, how much we've been generating. It's all very nice for us. The one thing I would look at is for the future, it's the 7.2 gigawatt hours on the bottom right hand side, and that was going back to the grid. So hence in the future our research into battery storage and so forth to try and use more of that power that we generate renewably and greenly on the ports themselves. And moving forward. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a recap of what I've just said. Is since 2011, we've spent £50 million on green technologies, and this has led to an absolute greenhouse gas emissions reduction of 27%, which we are quite proud of on that way. But obviously, there's always room for improvement, and there's more PV and technology coming online in the Humber and Southampton at the moment. Next slide, please. Reducing waste. One of the other things, even though this is not so much towards the decarbonisation, but one of the things we've been concentrating on all is reducing our landfill, and we've managed by just using different contractors for different waste products. We've managed to reduce that by 90%. So I'm pretty happy and then pretty proud of that as well. Next slide, please. Now we'll start talking about our issues and what we've been looked at. So from a South Wales approach, how we approached this was to look at our energy mix. And realistically, we looked at it in two ways as well. Is there's stuff that you will do that will be financial reduction, and there's stuff that will do that will be a financial or a carbon reduction. So if we looked at, let's say if you looked at, say, reducing our usage in red rates, that doesn't really lead to decarbonisation. So we looked at a two-approach system of that. So on the decarbonisation approach, we split it up into electricity and fuel. So we looked at electricity. How do we purchase our electricity from the grid? And what about renewable generation and storage? And we were the first region, I think, to put in PV and to put in wind turbines. From the fuel side of it was a little bit more difficult because we're looking at heating for buildings, plant, for a mobile plant around the ports, and for vehicles, because the ports are spread out over 50 miles in South Wales. We do have staff moving about, and for pilotage. So obviously our boats go out to drop our pilots off at the ships 6-7 miles out sometimes. So there's a usage there. And so we basically split it that way for that. Okay, next slide, please. With electricity, which is my remit, first of all, we looked at the purchase. The group looked at the purchase of electricity, and we're quite pleased that we're on with a company that supplies us for grid power, and that's biomass generated generally. And that way, for the electricity on the ports themselves, then what we could do locally, we looked at renewable generation, and we're quite proud in South Wales that we've got 5.3 megawatts of wind generation. That's 4.6 at Newport and 500 at Swansea. And we've got 5.27 megawatts of solar supplies. And the solar supplies supply both ABP usage and our customers, and that is split up between the 4 ports in South Wales, with the majority being generated at Barry. Issues with this we found with the location of the wind turbines, especially because you can't have them on flight paths. You have issues with sound. We use ABP MER, which is based in Southampton, to look at our environmental issues. And you have to look at the factors such as residents and generally other activities in the area. One of our strategic pillars is that we're good neighbours as well. So we don't want to put in a wind turbine that will upset everybody. And then we look at solar and wind together. You're looking at the connection availabilities to the grid. So you're looking at the in-house usage, and you're looking at the grid availability. Even if you're not exporting, at the moment there's obviously issues in South Wales with statement of works from National Grid. So it's the way we looked to put this was dependent on the DNO and on NGT. Next slide, please. Fuel. Now, my colleagues will tell me my mechanical colleagues will tell me I'm not great on the fuel side of it. When we looked at the fuel, we broke it down to the vehicle fuel, the staff movements around the region, the plant, the mobile harbour cranes, material handlers, forklift trucks, telehandlers, and the various shovel loaders. You know, we have a wide mix of plant. And one of the problems is when we're purchasing new plant, apart from the fact of which way we go on fuels, is even if you're looking at the same of diesel kit, the old plant, it's apart from what we record as fuel usage, you can't say this engine is going to be 30% more efficient, because a lot of the older plants hasn't got that sort of data. And then I know a marine department are concentrated on the pilot vessels. We spent quite a lot of money in the group on the hull design to reduce it, and we're upgrading the engines at the moment. So the one thing I haven't put on here was fuel for the buildings, because generally the fuel for the buildings, we're either using gas. In Swansea we use biomass, or we use electric. So we haven't really concentrated on that at the moment. And next slide, please. I'll say now the strategy for the vehicles. We looked at the reduction in the miles, and lately via the meetings online, and I would say we're probably a bit slow on this. Maybe COVID has pushed us, ABP, and a lot of companies to embrace online technology for carrying out meetings. Before we had them, but we don't use them to the same extent and success that we use them now. We've looked at the past in alternative greener fueled vehicles, gas powered vehicles for our security departments and so forth, electric vehicles. A lot of our ports now are starting to use electric vehicles, but there's obviously an issue with the range of them and how we use them. And we've also started to track fuel usage a lot better. Between the fuel on vehicles and on plant and our port activities, we do have air quality monitoring on most of our ports. I'll say most because I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is. The issues for the fuel for the vehicles, as I say, until recently, do we use EV? Will it be hydrogen? Which way we go? We do have quite a few electric vehicles around the group, none in South Wales at the moment. We're rescheduling another trial. We done a trial a couple of years ago, and the range wasn't there how we use them, even when we're using them around the site for the crafts and breakdowns and so forth. Hydrogen vehicles, when we looked into that, it'd be the same as plant. How do we source green hydrogen? It's pointless making a hydrogen vehicle if it's going to be powered by hydrogen generated by coal or the grid. And like I said at the bottom of there, is EV is the range was limited and suitable applications and the infrastructure for charging. And we shall come on to that later in the electrical part. Next slide, please. The strategy for plant is even more difficult than the one for fuel because of the different types of plant and how we use them and the amount of times that we do use them. You know, if we buy a new material handling crane, that's got a 10-year life. So we're looking over that, you know, how it will be used over its lifetime. One of the things we have done is we revamped a lot of our old quayside cranes. Apart from they're quite nice to see when you're driving past the port, you know, if you look at the ones in Newport and Swansea, they'll now, because they're electric still and they're based on the quayside, and we spend a lot of money on them to upgrade them. They'll still be powered by the renewable generation that we have on the port from the wind and from the solar. And looking basically into the plant stuff, we try to go for more efficient plant, and basically some of our material handlers use a hybrid lift system where they generate the power back into the hydraulics and so forth. Issues for the plant and the fuel. Until recently, yet again, we're trying to decide hydrogen, diesel or electric. Hydrogen vehicles, how to source out green hydrogen. Electric plant, it's the charging time, length of charge time, the infrastructure available for, say, the material handling cranes, where you're looking at some of them will need at low voltage up to 300, 400, 500 amps. So it's our old plug box system for our cranes wouldn't accommodate that. So it's how do we sort out the infrastructure for it as well, and the considerable local power that would require. And for both its vehicle size, you could probably be looking at electric vehicles for fork trucks, say up to 7 ton, but generally most other things will be hydrogen or so forth, or whatever the next generation of fuel is. So next slide, please. And like I say, the strategy for our pilotage, we've been looking at alternative greener fuel vessels or more efficient vessels. We've lately been undergoing an engine change on our boats, which has reduced the fuel consumption by 10 litres per hour. So it's probably just about a 10% reduction in that. Our Humber pilotage is trying out a new design on the hull. We've looked at electric vessels, but they don't have the range. I think the one that we looked at is you had, for a half-hour usage, you had a 4-hour charge, so it wasn't too good. And obviously for the big shipping and the small pilotage boats, is it going to be hydrogen or ammonia? So it's waiting to see kind of which way we're going to go with that as well. So, next slide, please. So moving forward, this is what we've been doing. So how are we looking to move forward? Electricity, we're looking at to increase our wind or solar generation. One of the things about ABP is that we do have quite a bit of land. So we can look at either floor mounted, or we can look at roof mounted. So what we would like, we've currently got solar in 4 of our 5 ports in South Wales, and we would like to have renewable generation in every port and be able to say that. With what we use, we're looking at battery storage as well, because there's times obviously when the wind isn't so good, or when our peak power comes up a bit more, so that we can not be putting power out the door to the grid and be using it all on docks for ourselves and for our customers. Because between the light and day, wind and no wind, it's the port keeps going. The other thing we've been extensively doing is we've been changing all our transformers and our LEDs and so forth. So we make a lot of power. So it's not just about generating the power, it's saving the power as well. Hence being part of the 50,001 programme and so forth. Issues. For South Wales, it's one of the big issues is connection to the grid due to the restrictions at local and NGT level in South Wales. And I think from National Grid, the statement is there's going to be restrictions till about 2026. Forecasting our increased demand from EV, future heating applications, and possible green hydrogen demand from both ABP and customers, and shore connections. With the EV, we've been looking at where can we put charging points, how we're going to run it. And for the bigger plant, we're looking at Barry, where we generate quite a bit of surplus power. Could we start producing our own hydrogen? So green hydrogen from there. And this would be for our customers and for us as well. Shore connections is quite a difficult one. Already our pilotage has a shore connection, so they come up, they anchor, and they plug in, the engines are off, and it's fine. The trouble with South Wales is our boats, our ships are in and out. We haven't got any long stay vessels, and we have a multitude of vessels as well. So it's the shore connections that are a little bit more tricky to work out how we're going to do that. Next slide, please. Moving forward with the fuel, our modern kit is all Tier 4 engines, and I could be wrong, but I think we're going up to Tier 5 in the near future. We have recoverable schemes such as hybrid lift on the material handling machines, and this is all to reduce the emissions of them while we go forward. The issues, as I said, with our plant and how we move forward is EV plant, the infrastructure needed for the increased power demands, and the direction of the technology. And like I've said before, it's really speaking there, if you're looking at like electric fork trucks and stuff, only really viable up to about 7 ton. And then you start looking at the charging times and so forth. So will the direction of the technology be the hydrogen plant for the bigger kits, which will be, hopefully, which will be generated from ourselves or from a green source, such as I said, Barry. So, next slide, please. There's a picture of Barry Solar, which is one of my favorites as I help put it in. And that on a good day, pardon me, generates enough power for the whole of Barry Port. And if we were to go down the road of hydrogen, we would probably have at least 1.5 gig spare, meg spare, sorry, to support hydrogen production. But that is in the future, and it's one of the many things we're looking at. You know, as well as how we combat the problems of grid connections and so forth. So I hope I haven't spoken too quickly. I've been too brief. But that's from Mark. That's me done.
So it's over to me next. Thank you very much, Craig. So hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Moss, and I'm going to talk to you twice today, but first and foremost to sort of tell you a little bit more about the scale of the opportunity when it comes to decarbonising our ports and harbours. So I'm leading on one of the working groups within the Decarbonising Ports and Harbours Network, Innovation Network, and it's going to be focused on landscape mapping. So what is the opportunity and where is it? So the scale of the challenge is also the scale of the opportunity. So you may or may not be aware that maritime sector is responsible for around 2.5% of worldwide GHG emissions. And that's around 950 million tons of CO2. So it's an international problem, and it's a very large problem. As I think as a country, this was represented as a country, it's around the similar GHG emissions to Germany. So the emissions from the ports themselves, it's less documented on where these emissions actually occur, whereas for the actual ships and the ships movements, that can be tracked quite well. So a little bit of an estimation, but global emissions from ships while they're actually in port in 2011, I appreciate the data's a little bit old there, but it's around 18 million tons. So it's not insignificant. So how do we actually go about sort of quantifying what emissions occur from the ports themselves and the activities that go on in there? So we have put together at least a first stage of a landscape map. It includes 200 ports and harbours within the UK. So we're really focusing here on the major ports and harbours, and that is defined by DFT as ports with over 1 million tonnes of throughput. From the DFT transport stats, we've identified 53 major ports that would constitute being within scope for this innovation network. So when we talk about the scope, what activities are we actually talking about within the ports themselves? So you've obviously got the infrastructure that's in place. You've got any sort of vehicles that, as Craig has mentioned, so your forklifts, so maybe your road sweepers, your gritters that go around the port, any sort of machinery, heavy lifting machinery, your cranes, they all come under scope there. And then the vessels themselves that belong to the port or are owned by the port, such as your tugs or worker boats and any ships that are in berth and maybe hooking up to power there. So as I've mentioned, let's go into a little bit more detail. So on the infrastructure themselves, you've got your buildings and your dry docks. Now, typically they account for a very low amount of energy usage or fuel consumption and even emissions within the port. So they're normally through electricity or gas, and they're probably, a very minority share of the emissions. But as we go down here, sort of into the port side vehicles, this is when the emissions from this category start to increase. So those there are predominantly on diesel, although some may be swapping over to electric, but that transition still hasn't happened. So they are quite a large source of emissions. But then the next category is probably even higher still. So the portside machinery, these are burning through lots and lots of diesel to do their activities in and around port, moving cargo around. Although we are starting to see electrified or even hybrid cranes and hoppers and conveyors, there's still predominantly a diesel there. So again, a large source of emissions. But the vessels themselves, those that come into port and sort of berthed up for long periods of time and they're not connected to shore power, they're simply keeping their engine on and chugging away, and all those sort of CO2 and other sort of molecules that we don't want to appear in the local area are just constantly being churned out into the local environment. And what can we do to perhaps curb those emissions? There's also imports third-party vehicles. So you may get your lorries, your trucks, and even rail coming into the port. But we've deemed this out of scope for this innovation network because we want to concentrate on what the ports themselves can actually control, but not to ignore them. They do have a part to play in the overall decarbonising of a port. It's just what can we control here and now from a port's perspective. But we are talking to those sort of road and rail hauliers to try and keep them included in the innovation network and making sure that they are kind of all feeding into the same strategy, which is that goal towards net zero. So here is the landscape map. Rather than flick out, tab in and out between tabs and whiz around the landscape map, I've taken some screenshots for you here so you can see what it is we've built to date, and then I'll explain a little about what we intend to do in the future, and my colleague Simon will follow on explaining the work he's been done, which will also build into this landscape map. But here we have a list of, you can see on the right, those are where the UK's major ports and harbours are. We've got a little bit of a breakdown by what category they are, whether they're a seaport, a river port, even a canal. According to the DFT, the Manchester Ship Canal is classed as a major port. You can argue about the definition of port, but that is included there. And hence why there's perhaps some ports that look like they're in the middle of the country where there's no sea around them. We've also tried to categorize what sort of, I guess, infrastructure they have in place there, whether that is just a road connection, whether they have a rail connection there, whether there's a freight terminal, because that allows us to see what vehicles are coming in and out of the port and kind of what we can control within this innovation network and how we can steer the stakeholders towards decarbonisation. So one important aspect, and I think this is where we're looking to build on further, is if we know what activities occur on the ports and what is being moved in and out of the ports, we can ascertain what sort of machinery may be there, and then we can then narrow that down to what energy or fuel usage they're using currently and what would be a good fuel or energy usage to transition towards in the future. So this is a little map too, and on the left a sort of little block diagram sort of showing what movement is going through the port, what are we shipping through, what is the throughput there, because if we're moving a lot of containers, there's probably going to be a lot of cranes and machinery handling equipment. If it's more liquid, maybe that's not necessary. If it's passengers, we perhaps know that maybe if it's passenger ferries, electrification is more apt for the application. So this is where we are at the moment, is really finding out where the ports are and what they're doing. What we're looking to do next is build upon this by getting, I guess, a list of asset data on either the machinery that's in the ports, or can we work backwards from perhaps annual tonnage of these categories here and work out how much energy or fuel is being utilized. And from there, we're hoping to put a solutions roadmap together to identify sort of key sort of stakeholders and organizations within the UK that could come and tackle some of these problems and help the switch towards more, let's say, lower emission machinery or operations in the port. And then we're going to do that sort of matchmaking element of matching the solution providers to the challenge holders who've got these heavy carbon emitting machinery, and then try and solve the challenge in that way. And my colleague Simon, I think on the next page, is now going to talk to you a little bit about emissions and how that ties into the overall landscape map. So that is me. I think we're 20 seconds ahead of time. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Matt, for that timely presentation. So good afternoon all, and thank you for joining today's session. My name's Simon and I look after the low emission mobility at KTN. My background is within manufacturing deployment of energy storage and large electric vehicles, so like refuse vehicles, which do have some similarity to what you might see in a port and harbour. Today, we will go through some of the work KTN have done within this innovation network, building on the work that Matt's done and focusing on the emissions of ports and their associated users. Next slide, please. So firstly, just a little bit of context. So why does this matter for ports and harbours? So air pollution, I'm sure you're all aware, is a major public health risk, and it poses possibly the greatest environmental risk to human health, or at least directly. This is backed up by a number of reports about the economic and health impact that air quality has. And on top of that, we've obviously got the decarbonisation that is crucial for the sector and for all sectors to reach our targets of net zero by 2050. So to date, domestic policy on transport-related air pollutant emissions has largely focused on roads, and so particularly in relation to, say, NOx for air quality. But as a major transport hub, like say Milford Haven or something like that, we have a duty to look at their emissions and to plan on how they can not only improve internally, but also enable change within wider sectors. And that's where it links to road and rail. I think I should note that it's recognised that port operators may not have the ability to directly influence emissions from their users, particularly in cases where vessels are subject to existing international rules, because we don't necessarily have the ability to change that regulation, but they can be very much part of the indirect solution and be key enablers, like some of the work that Craig was talking about. So next slide, please. So within this working group, the air quality working group, our methodology was to first look at what data was available around ports and to see if there was a generic issue of air pollutants that we could pick out. We can then begin to ascertain the impact that those emissions may have, with the end goal being to help ports, as Matt previously mentioned, to reduce emissions via innovation, via our innovation network. To understand this, we also need to look at what is causing the emissions within the port area at a more forensic level, and to understand the emitters that use the port. So they would include your road rail connections and shipping operators. Armed with this information, it is possible to look at where novel technology and policy could help us improve air quality and decarbonise the sector. And we could do that, as we'll come across later, via, say, our innovation exchange platform. So next slide, please. So very quickly, we pulled some public data from the National Atmospheric Emissions Inventory. We looked at a number of major ports in the UK, and in this context today, I'm just talking UK-wide, but this is obviously applicable to Wales, it's applicable to Northern Ireland, it's applicable to the northeast of England, etc. So I'm just focusing on NOx. I'm doing that just for simplicity for the presentation, but there are obviously other emissions that are also directly relevant. So darker squares mean that there are higher emissions of NOx within the area. And you can see, for instance, one of the issues within ports, outside T-Sport, you can see that there are a number of emissions just outside the port where ships are queuing to come inside. You can also see a good correlation between some of the emissions and where the ports are. So whether this causes a health risk to inhabitants of nearby conurbations depends on a number of factors. So there might be prevailing wind, geographical distance. That kind of work is outside the scope of what we're trying to do here. The next slide, please. So it's important to note that, as I said, this only shows correlation, does not show cause and effect. There are also typically large industrial process points around, such as power stations around ports. So you can see those as red dots on the map. So all we do is here, we look at a baseline, it gives us a baseline, but we need to work with a port to look at the emitters on a more minute scale to understand where the emissions are coming from a port perspective. Next slide, please. So what has been done? So I just wanted to highlight, now this is only actually relevant to English ports, but I believe that this is an activity that all ports should be doing. So DEFRA and DFT have requested that all ports, English ports, develop and publish a port air quality strategy by July 2020. Now, obviously that to date has passed, but it is recognised, and this is reading directly from their document, it's recognised, however, that ports have different levels of influence, and that while they will have direct control of some activities, others fall outside of their immediate control. In essence, ports should understand the emissions that arise from their core operations, have an appreciation of the emissions that arise from other maritime activity, such as shipping and cargo operations, in areas under their jurisdiction and develop responses to these emissions at an appropriate level that reflects their ability to influence the emissions. So that's the kind of context about what DEFRA and DFT were trying to get out of this document. I think due to Brexit and COVID, the kind of double whammy there has been some delays in the public dissemination of these air quality plans. And you can see on the bottom right, some of the key areas that they're trying to focus on. The identification of the emission sources and the mitigating factors are key to what we're trying to achieve. So next slide, please. So I've pulled out some information from 2 publicly available port air quality strategies that have been published with some breakdown of emissions. So non-road mobile machinery, which has been talked about quite a bit today. This is typically operated by a port and makes about 10% of NOx emissions in the control area. So that's where the port can directly control. NOM typically includes things like cranes, tugs, dredgers. Berth vessels have an extremely significant impact within ports, and this is when they're idling. Now, the percentages will vary from port to port, depending on what service they're operating, but it's clear that berth vessels and providing shore power, as Mark will talk about later, is crucial to how we decarbonise and reduce emissions in this sector. Road and rail have a minimal impact within the boundaries of the port, but the traffic flows for the road and ships once they leave the port are a concern. And I think ports need to be part of that journey and listen to what is going on in the transport decarbonisation plan and how they can help enable that. They can't obviously define road policy, but they can make it easier for zero emission users to utilise their ports. So next slide, please. So if we look at the in-port activities and we take a look at that non-road mobile machinery sector, we can see that the Port of Dover tugs and dredgers are the largest emitters, and common between both ports is the large amount of emissions from idling ships within the port, as we discussed. So if there was shore power available in the form, say, ammonia, hydrogen or electricity, then these emissions could be eliminated. This does not come without challenges, however. It is also worth noting that this is a small sample size. To solve innovation challenges, we need to share data between all the major ports and get a greater understanding of what this problem is and how we can best solve it collaboratively. Next slide, please. Very quickly, I just reordered Matt's slide a little bit to do with actually where the largest emission sources are. Now, at the top, I think shore power, as we discussed, is incredibly important to decarbonise, and portside machinery, because it's in direct control of the port, and portside vehicles are good areas to focus on, because that's something ports can do now with less third-party intervention. Next slide, please. So just summing up, so shore power, ships at berth, are an issue from an emissions point of view. How do we make sure they have a zero emission infrastructure available to power ships? Quite often these connections will be very high power, hence the challenge. Non-road machinery. So what mobile interventions can be brought across from other sectors? What assets should we target? So can we learn from the automotive sector? Can we bring technology in from there? Road and rail, how can ports play their role in transport decarbonisation? What can they do to enable the green technology? And how can they link up the transport decarbonisation plan, which is coming out in March? So one final point, data. So a problem shared is a problem halved. I think we need to share data regarding emissions for the greater good of society. So thank you very much and look forward to any questions. And I will pass you back to Mark.
Okay, thank you, chaps. And yeah, it's good to see those questions coming in. Yeah, we've got quite a flow of them. So please do get your questions into the hub and then they'll be forwarded on to us and we'll do our best to get through as many of those. Right, so one of the activities that we'll be doing within the Innovation Network, we'll be running a set of innovation exchange challenges on behalf of some of our advisory group members. And these are designed to help them solve some of the, or start to solve some of the here and now challenges they face. Next slide, please. So for those who aren't familiar with the Innovation Exchange process, this is a KTN product which provides a platform to help major organisations who have technical challenges, which they've been unable to solve from within their existing supply chain, find new solution providers from a wider pool of potential suppliers. Helps the challenger find a broader range of solutions with minimal resource demand. And for the solution provider, this gives them an accelerated pathway to the right person in a target client and the exposure they need for their product or solution. Next slide, please. So access the IX platform, you need to head to the web page. It's got its own dedicated web page. Create yourself an account, or if you already have one, log in. And then under challenges, you'll find the challenges that we're going to be talking about shortly. They'll be going up there in the next month. But you'll also find all the other net zero carbon and other challenges that we've put on there. And they come from a whole variety of different sectors and appear there to go and explore and potentially put your solutions forward for. Next slide, please. So the way the Innovation Exchange process works is as follows. First of all, we start with a challenge translation work. So having been approached by the challenge owner, we hold a translation workshop with their technical team to better understand what their challenge is and translate these often very technical aspects into a set of more universally worded statements of need that can be understood and engaged with a wider audience. Then we move to the competition stage. So this is where we release the competition documents and promote them through our networks and through the portal we just showed you. And here we've got over 120,000 individual R&D active people coming from 45,000 different organisations. And the competition stays open for entrants for a short period, typically 50 days, and then the portal will close down entrance into that competition. But anybody can enter into that competition. It's open to the public. Then we go through a solution selection process, and we work with members of the challenger's technical team, and we review the submissions that have come in, and then invite solution providers of interest to come in and pitch their ideas and put forward their proposals. We then, for the successful ones who have gone through that solution selection stage, we then move into a relationship building stage. And typically this can be a select few providers who will be shortlisted and invited to come in and have a more engaging discussion with the challenger and their team to look at advancing their solution, which of course can take a variety of pathways, which could include direct procurement, further investment, seeking co-funding or co-developing. And then of course the final stage is to look at providing feedback to all those who have participated. Next slide, please. So in terms of the process when the competition opens, then the information that we're actually looking for is fairly straightforward. So at competition stage, there's a requirement for the applicant solution provider to submit some concise details on what their proposal is about. But this is not a loan or grant funding application, so we don't need pages and pages, just simply who are you and where are you? What's your idea? How far have you got with it? How ready are you to commercialize it or develop it? And then the technical responses that are specific to that call. There's no requirement at this stage to provide detailed costings or programs or anything like that. So it really is something that many applicants find they're able to do just over a lunchtime. Next slide, please. So when it comes to this particular innovation network and the innovation exchange challenges we have currently on the books, we have two major challenges: mitigating stranded diesel assets and energising ships in port. And the energising ships in port one has also been subdivided into two sub-challenges around making efficient connections and managing efficient energy transfer. So we're planning on launching these challenges in the next month, so early in February. We expect them to be open probably for 45 days. But as I say, do log on to the portal and check for details. Next slide, please. So looking at the challenges in a bit more detail. So the first challenge, approaches to mitigate against stranded diesel assets. So a working group of our network, which includes ABP Limited, BAE Systems, Forth Ports and the Port of Tyne, are examining the potential for innovative solutions to mitigate against stranded diesel assets. An effective means to reduce pollution and decarbonise activity in the short to medium term will be to reduce the demand and eventually replace the fossil fuels that are being used to derive energy to power mobility, as Simon said in his focused in his presentation. These are the port-side assets. So ports are home to a wide array of plant and equipment, as well as acting as a hub to a range of mobile transport, including ships, rail and road freight. The portside equipment itself represents a substantive investment for the port operators, and these have long working lives. Working boats will typically run for 20 years, and lifting equipment can last up to 25 years. As air quality and greenhouse gas mitigation legislation starts to take in effect, then the use of these diesel burning assets will be restricted or potentially banned. If you could click the mouse map. Then turning them into, so this will then turn them into stranded assets, representing a significant write-down of those company assets. So largely, these stranded assets can be categorized into three areas: static equipment, such as tower cranes and hoppers; smaller mobile equipment with lower loads, such as forklifts; and then the larger mobile equipment with higher load demand for long use cycles. The solutions that we'll be looking for will be required to enable a wide range of plant and equipment, road, rail and water-based transport found at ports to transition from diesel burning high carbon intensity propulsion to a low or preferably zero carbon energy propulsion. Supply solutions could be derived from approaches which could include, if you could click again, Matt, allow for the replacement of the energy supply system, which could either replace the entire energy input or augment the existing propulsion system. Replace the diesel fuel or energy source within the asset whilst maintaining similar performance profiles. Or reduce the diesel use through modelling of energy use, monitoring the asset, providing user feedback, deploying energy conservation measures, or through improved maintenance. Next slide, please. So this challenge for approaches to delivering energy supplies to ships in port, and this is about the sub-challenge 1, the efficient connections. So this challenge is headed by a working group, again drawn from our network, including ABB, BAE Systems, the Port of Cromarty Firth, Forth Ports, the Port of London Authority and Vattenfall networks. These are all looking to examine the potential for innovative solutions to the problem of bringing energy supplies to ships in an efficient and cost-effective way. At present, there's a niche market meeting the ancillary demand for shore-based power, which is mainly arising from the international cruise ship market. So current demand is rather intermittent and only for larger power demand end of the market. This is creating oversized solutions with high capital costs and long payback periods, typically over 100 years. So this makes it untenable for most ports to invest. Current solutions in the market are based on connecting grid-derived supplies via cables with a variety of non-universal or bespoke connectors to the ship. And these cables are often heavy and difficult to manipulate and create health and safety challenges whilst in operation. If you could click there, Matt. So these organisations are therefore looking for innovative approaches as either market ready or development projects for systems to efficiently connect land-based energy generation, grid or localised, and transfer this electrical energy across a range of supply sizes from smaller vessels upwards. The solution will need to be agile and account for the complex and intense uses of ports and be operated with a minimal number of staff, ideally 2 or less. And they must also accommodate a range of connection types, as this has not been made a universal system for connecting. Next slide, please. So our final slide in this one, so this is sub-challenge 2 now. So this is about energy efficient management. So again, the same working group as the first sub-challenge. are looking at examining the potential for innovative solutions to the problem of bringing energy supplies to ships in an efficient and cost-effective way. The demand for the land-based solutions for energising portside equipment and delivering energy to ships and vessels whilst in port is diversifying and growing. The energy used for the portside operations is mainly related to lighting, personal transport, lifting and cargo moving equipment. The energy used for ships is to allow the ship to shut down the carbon producing engines and, as you just saw in Simon's presentation, the NOx producing engines, and keep all the systems within the ship working. Operations on board ship might include lighting, heating, cooling, powering ship controls and communication systems, and their lifting and moving or their processing of cargo. The supply of energy is not infinite and will need to be matched to dynamic and competing demand priorities, and energy needs to be efficiently managed to ensure the efficient operation of the ongoing port. These organisations are therefore looking for innovative approaches as either market-ready or development projects for systems to efficiently manage these competing energy demands. Next slide, please. So what's in it for you if you're an applicant? So this provides you with the opportunity to pitch to the challenges and get your ideas in front of these potential clients. It's to have some quality time with their technical team, not just talking to someone in procurement. And depending on your needs, we can then help selected providers with support from our innovation networks to find collaboration partners or seek funding. We can help you with advice on developing your idea and have the opportunity to showcase your solution at some of our future events, and hopefully, ultimately lead to a commercial offer from one of the challenge owners or one of our other interested stakeholders. Okay, that should be me finished then for that section. Then Matt, that should be over to you now.
Thanks very much, Mark. Yeah, and back to me for the moment you've all been waiting for. Where's the money? So funding opportunities for the sector. So I'll try and keep this brief because I know we want to fit in a Q&A after this. Let's just click through to the next slide. So as many people would be aware, at the end of last year in November, Boris Johnson announced the 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution. And there was some, I think, from my perspective, four main categories of funding that would sort of transcribe across into the maritime sector and opportunities for funding down the line. So we've heard Craig, Mark, Simon and myself all talk about the potential for sort of hydrogen as one of the potential fuels of the future for the maritime sector, replacing sort of like for like a liquid fuel with a liquid fuel. The government have committed to putting 240 million into a net zero hydrogen fund. Now, not all of this is going to be for transport. Some of this is going to be for home heating as well, but it's really going to sort of kickstart that hydrogen production within the UK. And as a potential end user of the fuel, I think maritime companies need to be aware that that funding is out there and it will be coming, though more details are set to be announced. As Craig mentioned, ABP have great sort of links and assets in the offshore wind world. There is going to be 160 million available to modernise ports to help support that offshore wind infrastructure. And the competitive process for that was launched kind of last year, and we're still, I guess, waiting for the results of that. Now, two programs that I've been involved with and Simon has also been involved with. So I'll talk first to the 20 million for Clean Maritime Demonstrator Programme. Now that competition is currently being scoped, and there are webinars ongoing this week hosted by Maritime UK to kind of brief the industry and warm you up to the prospect of what that competition may ensue. But it is going to be, that money's got to be spent within the year. If you don't spend it, they're going to lose it. So it's really looking for big shovel-ready projects, sort of putting your project plan, your business idea, your feasibility study in place this year, with the view that in subsequent spending years, there'll be a larger pot of money to apply into. So you've got to be kind of in it to win it. But they're expecting that competition to at least be announced in the next couple of weeks and then sort of deployed and live spring, summertime. So that's one really to be aware of, for particularly for around fuel for vessels, but also portside infrastructure that help facilitate that. And then likewise, we've got 20 million in a similar vein to the Clean Maritime Demonstrator, but the freight trials to support hydrogen and zero emission HGVs. We've all spoken about the sort of types of vehicles that are involved moving cargo and goods around the port. obviously they're going to be applicable for this type of funding, and that competition is again being scoped as we speak. So these are the big headline sort of pots of money that are going to be available, though more details are set to come. For sort of more sort of perhaps general and smaller pots of money, I think the best opportunity that is live right now is through MARI UK, called the Smart Maritime Land Operations Call. So MARI UK are really a bridge between industry and academia. They've got a small pot of money available from the DFT, and they release these funding calls perhaps every 6 months to a year. The current live call, the deadline is open till the 15th of February. There's a total of just under 1.5 million available, and I expect them to fund a series of projects there. That's not just one big problem, and they're really looking to help that interface between the sea and the shore, helping goods move effectively, efficiently, and most importantly in a clean manner and green manner. I've popped in there Innovate UK Smart Grants, the ever-present funding stream from Innovate UK. They've got a really open scope, so anyone can apply into that. And these are sort of perpetuate throughout the year in quarterly sort of cycles. The deadline for the current strand is the 26th of May, but you can apply up to, I think, 2 million, even 3 million if you ask very nicely there for your sort of innovation project. A bit of a shameless plug for KTN and KTPs. They see the deadline for that one was actually yesterday, but there is going to be another one opening up. So these again are quarterly projects. It's a three-way collaboration between business, academia, and then a recent graduate or PhD student and associate. And it's really about embedding academic expertise in a company and ensuring that tech transfer is a smooth process there. So watch out for the latest round of those. And then again, that can be open scope. I put in there some regional funding and support. Now, if you're lucky enough, depending on where you are in the country, you might have a great local LEP or innovation centre. I know in the Southwest in particular, and even South Wales, there are at least funding, small pots of funding for SMEs and sort of business support available. So I'd encourage you to contact them. I mean, I think it's be a very long list to list every single one in the country, but you can always come to one of us at KTN and we can point you in the right direction. Horizon Europe is an opportunity that is sort of coming after Horizon 2020, which is just finished. The UK are still eligible to participate in these calls. Now, the calls are not going to be open until March this year, but having seen a draft of the sort of call topics, there are plenty that are applicable to the marine and maritime industry. So that's one to at least go and have a look at the draft call topics and start seeing where you might fit in now to get in on those calls. These are really sort of big European-wide projects, and there's a lot of money on offer to drive innovation within Europe and within the sector. So that is a very quick roundup and of the sort of current funding available. And now I think I'm going to hand back to Mark and over to some Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, we've got just over 5 minutes for some questions. And I'm going to answer the first one myself, which was working backwards is, are you looking for one company to deliver a solution to all of this, or would collaboration with others be possible? If you're referring to certainly the innovation exchanges, then certainly then the collaboration is certainly encouraged. Or you can enter as a single applicant. There's no fixed rules on there. And for the various competitions that Matthew was just showing there, then it will be down to whatever is in the guidance that is for that particular competition page. So, Matt, first question to you then. Are there examples of where decarbonisation approaches have been implemented in the list of areas that you included within your slide deck there?
There's probably not one consolidated list, but there are good examples from around the UK. Maritime UK, who are, I guess, the umbrella body for the maritime sector, are in the process of putting together a comprehensive list of all these kind of exemplar projects that show decarbonisation. But there isn't yet, as I say, one list to rule them all. There are examples from individual ports, some in Humber, some in Tyne. Craig has mentioned some of the work that's ongoing there, but there are examples in and around the UK of where technology has been deployed for these various decarbonisation decarbonisation solutions. It's a case of there's a little bit going on here and a little bit going on there at the moment, and it's not, I guess, a universal blanket that everyone has an electric crane at the moment because of course, the high capital costs.
Great, thank you. And we'll be, within our community, we will be having a monthly newsletter, and where we come across good examples and best practice, we'll certainly be sharing those and writing thought pieces. So please do sign up to our newsletter, and we'll be sharing intel that we have around where good practice is occurring. And of course, if you've got specific questions, then please do come back to any one of us. Simon, next. So are there any lessons to be learnt around emissions from other sectors that could be applied to ports, so emissions controls?
I think, yeah, that's a good question, very much so. I think it's looking at the mistakes as much as anything. There's been a lot of false starts since probably the year 2000 within decarbonising some sectors. And for instance, I'll give you an example. Converting engines for natural gas is an area where, unless you know that the duty cycle, because you have a lower energy density for natural gas, you're reducing the power of that vehicle. You need to make sure that the conversion you're doing on the vehicle can do the duty cycle and do the work that it needs to do within a port. So I think you've got to look at what mistakes have been made within, say, the bus sector or whatever, because there have been mistakes, and take those and make sure we don't make the same mistakes when we're trying to decarbonise port side vehicles.
Excellent. Thank you, Simon. Is there anything, any particular groups or organisations that are sort of publishing their sort of lessons learned or their approaches in sort of particular units to connect with or follow?
I mean, there's one, I'd recommend joining the Niche Vehicle Network, and I'll put a link in the chat in a minute. Niche Vehicle Network covers a variety of, as you imagine, niche vehicles with a predominant UK manufacturing base. There is also the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, which has been set out by DFT about how we're going to decarbonise and how we're going to reach net zero, and that's coming out of the spring. And I think I would encourage everyone to read that and look what it says about all different transport types, because that is going to push the vision for UK going forward.
Thanks, Simon. Will that feature in our transport newsletter? Because bear in mind, the chat doesn't get seen by the delegates. That chat is only between the 5 of us. So,
yeah, when that is out, then that will go out in the newsletter. In
the transport newsletter. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Craig, over to you next. Question here, I think it's probably as a prompt or response to the picture you showed for Barry Island, where you obviously got a very extensive PV array there. So have you also looked at sort of for other ports or areas that aren't so blessed with so much space? Have you looked at the use of what they call active building materials? So this is where PV arrays are integrated into the roofs, or there is sort of solar collectors that are built into the walls of buildings. I think this is probably related to the Active Building Centre, which is in Swansea, just outside of Swansea University, part of a funded Innovate UK funded programme looking at developing those technologies.
In South Wales, not really, because the types of buildings we build are sheds, and we structurally build them so they can take PV. So generally, whatever shed we built in the last couple of years has been structurally designed to take a PV on there, and so forth. I know in Southampton, I think they were looking at PV in the roads around the car parks and the storage areas there, which is a new sector, but obviously that's quite a new option there. So sorry, no, it's for us, it's just introduction thing.
That's okay. No problem. Well, I'm also going to give you the last question as well, because we are going to have to wrap up shortly. So the last question was the tier 4 and tier 5 motors that you're referring to for the vessels. Are you looking at, are those designs that they are suitable for retrofitting? And is that something that's part of your sort of thought process when selecting replacement?
I know the Barry one was retrofitted. Whether that was, I think that was a tier 4. I'd have to check with my marine colleagues, but I'll say it is 10%, I think, in efficiency. But generally, when we look at plant and things like that, we buy in the new plant because the plant will be replacing is so aged, it's not worth retrofitting. But I know with the marine vessels that we are looking at retrofitting some of the engines.
Okay, right. I'm afraid that I think we're going to probably have to close there in terms of timing, because we've got to get ready for the next session, which starts at 1 o'clock. So there's only 5 minutes to allow people to move over to those. So I think we'll draw the questions to a close there. I just wanted to thank all of you for listening, all the delegates who have dialed in. I hope you found this interesting. Do come and find us on the KTN website and find us in the innovation networks there if you want to join up to our communities and contribute to the work. And of course, you can then obviously contact Simon, Matthew and myself. And it then leaves me to thank Simon, Matthew, and especially Craig from ABP, who's kindly given up his time to support us with this session. I hope you've all found it worthwhile, and I hope the audience have found it worthwhile. Any last thoughts, guys? If not, we'll call it a day.
Nope, just thanks everyone for attending, and as Mark said, just to reiterate, get in touch if you want to learn a little bit more about the Decarbonising Ports and Harbours Network, or in my case, anything specific for maritime that I can help with.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, chaps, and thank you, everybody, and I wish you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Emerging Tech Fest. Join us again on our virtual live sessions, or watch us on playback anytime, anywhere.